All right. So we're going to start with PJ, our chair, and he'll introduce the board and just a little bit of what we're doing up front as part of that, and then hand it back to me, and I'll go through our priorities and a couple of other things as part of that. So PJ, over to you.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Bill, for putting this all together tonight, and thank you, everybody here. This is a great turnout. There seems to be more and more energy and growing support for Forward Party. We're excited to give just a little bit of updates of where we are with everything. We're launching headfirst into the new year. There is a lot happening, and so we are growing and building this team. We currently have 65 active volunteers across our Maryland organization. We have about 150 on our volunteers list, but with 65 active team members. That's larger than a lot of small businesses and medium-sized businesses in the state. So it's very impressive of where we're heading this year. Today happens to be the start of the legislative session. We're diving into that. We're diving into hosting a few events, so we'll share more of that as we go along here. Last week, with the help of many of you who are now official members of the Maryland Forward Party.
Surveilling this.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Oh, you're on the.
We do have a new member status as of this last year. So those are volunteers paying the annual due. There'll be different times during the year for those members to participate in different activities. But through that support this year, we were able to elect our first competitive board elections that we've ever held. We had 11 candidates running for 9 open seats this year, all incredibly high quality, well-deserving candidates. And this is our new board as we head into the new year here. We're proud to welcome Teddy, Courtney, Matt Sampson, and Laura, who are all brand new board members this year. And we're excited to have them as new leaders. They've already proven kind of leadership throughout other committees and teams that they've been active on. Just stepping back as we look at kind of organizational structure for the Maryland Forward Party, with the board kind of in that central governance role, kind of looking out for the health and well-being of the organization. A strategy that we were looking at last year was how do we pull that leadership horizontally across the organization, looking at our county teams and growing those kind of outward, with county leads being at the center of that, and eventually growing out in smaller teams and team coordinators and leaders within those individual teams. On the other side of this, we have our committees. We have 5 central committees for the organization as of right now. And this will all continue to kind of grow and evolve as we do as an organization, but 3 of those are more externally focused, 2 of those are more internally focused. And within those committees, we have different teams, again, with kind of leadership working within the teams that kind of funnel information back up to the committees who funnel that information back to the boards. Independent of all of this, we're starting to have our first clubs as of this last year. So these are Maryland Forward clubs. A really successful one that we have is over at the Charlestown retirement community. I'm not sure if Roseanne is on the call. I know members of that community are on the call tonight. This is one of our fastest growing groups within the Maryland.
She's not available tonight, PJ, but Peggy Alexander's here.
Ah, that's great. Yeah, we saw Peggy earlier. This group meets on a regular basis. They're growing quickly. They're being active within their community there. They just held a 200-person ranked choice voting event on their campus with outside speakers, doing some very exciting stuff for us over there. These will continue to grow organically. We have a book club. Matt Sampson's been leading these mingle groups both in Columbia and Baltimore, and those are hoping to expand in the coming years. Bill has a wine club that we want to get more people involved with. So I think there's lots of potential to continue to grow these out. Looking across the state, we're really proud to add 3 new counties where we have county teams establishing. So Harford County, Baltimore County, and Worcester County are all new county leads this year, or counties within our leadership teams. And of these 10 counties that we now have teams set up, 7 of those had new leadership come through over the last year. So that's moving away from previous board members being in those roles and expanding it to that next tier of leadership, which is a great thing for us to be growing leadership horizontally that way. Nationally, Forward Party is now in 32 states. This is continuing to grow. I was just on a call yesterday. They're talking with 3 more states that are hoping to get up and running over the next month or 2. Maryland is ranking really well within all these states. We're in the top 5 for county leads as a percentage of our kind of population, and also fundraising and supporter growth over the last year. So we are showing really well and are considered leaders within the national landscape. Wanted to kind of start this conversation. Bill's going to go into a lot more depth about how we can be connecting with people. And we get this question. This is almost always the first question we get back when we start chatting with somebody about Forward Party. What's your platform? I think we're all kind of in tuned at this point to be very partisan. And so you're in this club or that club, and I need to know what your stances are. And it's always good to be able to step back and say, we are intentionally doing something very unique and different that doesn't look quite the same as your traditional political party, including the Greens, including the Libertarians. We're intentionally moving away from this very top-down approach where we have one-size-fits-all policy solutions that are not really meeting the needs of our day-to-day constituents. What we are trying to do instead is flip this on the script. So we're trying to go the opposite way. Forward is really all about at our core community up. And what that means is that we're in our communities, we're listening, we're learning what's actually important to those communities, and then we start to adopt those issues in localized policy agendas. This is a very different approach to politics. This is at the core of what we should be doing with politics, and we've gotten far away from this, where we have people in Congress no longer representing their constituents back at home, and instead are tied to ideology, and we're trying to break that and go back to this localized approach. It's good to remember that community is scalable, though. So we could be talking about a local social club that we're part of. It could be a neighborhood association or a religious organization that we're part of. It could be our town, our city. It could be the county. It could be the state of Maryland. Whatever that community tells us and that we're hearing, and the data should be supporting it, those are the issues we start to advocate on behalf of those communities. The other thing to remember is that it's always good to leave these conversations on a positive note. Even if people disagree with us throughout a conversation, we should always be able to step back and have them say, wow, that person was incredibly pleasant. I didn't agree with everything they're talking about, but that was a really nice experience, and I wouldn't mind talking to that person again. Politics isn't supposed to be scary. We should be embracing curiosity along the way. We should be asking questions, having dialogue. And then as we're doing this, we're building that trust relationship with people. It's the only way people are going to start to connect with us. We have to build trust. That takes time. But as an organization, we're committed to building those long-lasting relationships. And as we're going through this, it's important just to remember our 3 core values is what's going to keep us in line. It's going to keep the crazy out of the conversation. And it's a good reminder that we'll have a conversation with any single person on any issue from any party, so long as we can commit to collaboration, that community up problem solving approach, and protecting the rights of all people. As long as we can establish that level of baseline, anyone from our organization is able and willing to sit down and start that conversation. All of this fits within a broader context of a 5-year outreach that we started to lay out last year, and we'll be continuing to monitor, track, update this process as we look ahead for our 5 years plans as an organization. We are at a critical milestone this year. This is a gubernatorial election cycle year, and in Maryland, party status, new party status for minor political parties is tracked to the gubernatorial election cycle. So if we get all of our supporters this year, if we can get our signatures in place and turn those in the day after the election in November, then we start to maximize our window for keeping and maintaining that ballot access, which we will have to do targeting out to 2030, being able to maintain our ballot access by continued growth. So we're building this network as we go, essentially. And then once we get ballot access, 27, 28, 29, we could start to decide, are these the right priorities or not? Do we start to look at running somebody in District 1 potentially? Where do we start to expand? Do we start to expand to Southern, Eastern, Western Maryland? Some of that will start to depend on our growing priorities as we move ahead here. But we could be targeting these larger statewide elections. We could be starting to target some pretty serious elections if the momentum starts to shift here. Bill, I think that's my 15 minutes. Bill, you're muted.
Thanks, PJ. So moving into the next segment is to talk about the priorities, the 5 priorities that we have. So the slides that I'm using are ones we have used when we've been invited in to spend an hour with folks and really talk about, who are we, what are we trying to do, and what's the Forward Party all about, and particularly our priorities for the things that we're trying to do. So the first 3 slides are intended to establish some common ground with the audience that has a lot of frustration in the current political situation, and then walk them through these top 5 priorities that we have as part of that. So I've slightly changed a little bit of what I talk about, since it's primarily an internal audience as opposed to meeting folks for the first time. But it is something I wanted folks to get through, so that anytime you have a chance to talk with folks, whether it's a 1-minute conversation or an hour conversation, you know more and are able to do that and have that discussion. So start with, who's happy with today's political environment? Certainly I'm not. There's a lot of frustration after the November election, and some of the things really stand out. So, when you walked out of the ballot box in November, were you happy? When was the last time you really got excited about a candidate to vote for? For me, it was Ronald Reagan. That's how old I am. Okay, that's the last time I really got excited. And frankly, I didn't vote for him to be president, but by the time the re-election came through, I did, and he was. I put a lot of my concerns with Congress. They've got, for years, consistently a 20% approval rate and a 94% re-election rate. You can't stay in business if you do that, but Congress has done that and been able to do that. They seem to spend all their time trying to stop the other party from getting something done, so nothing gets done. Only 3 times in the last 48 years has Congress passed a budget for the full year. 3 times in 48 years. That's probably one of the biggest causes of the government inefficiency and waste of our taxpayer dollars. And Republicans and Democrats are equally to blame for that. So why can't we get some people elected who are going to work for the things that we need? So next slide. So what's the cause of these problems? What I would like to talk about a little bit is why we're so frustrated, and then some of the things that might make us possible to have more choices, to get excited about some candidates, and have some people in office who really want to work for us and do the things that we think need to get done. The entire electoral process in this country, and certainly in Maryland, for state and local elections, is totally under the controls of the Democrats and Republicans. It's a duopoly as opposed to monopoly, but it shuts out many of us from any meaningful role. It's government of the party, by the party, and especially for the party, as opposed to the people. So increasingly, both parties are moving more and more to the extreme and leaving those of us who are moderates, more and more of us are left homeless. And in the end, well, when did bipartisan become a four-letter word? So over 20% of the voters currently registered in Maryland are registered as independents. That's close to 1 million people. There is no independent party in Maryland. It lost its status in 2010. The only political parties in Maryland today are Democrats, Republicans, and the Green Party. We plan to have the Forward Party added to that list, as PJ said, hopefully next year. Only the Republicans and Democrats run primaries in Maryland, and our taxpayer dollars pay for them. But we have no say what happens in those. You've got to be registered with all those parties to vote in their primary. And the only choices you've got are the ones that pre-selected for you as part of that. The Democrats are the majority party in Maryland, and they've defined ridiculous electoral districts that we have. We'll talk more about that. So why do we have these? So the Democrats can win most of those districts, and they're trying to make it all those districts, and hold on to the majority. So how can the people who are supposed to represent you know what your problems and priorities are? Next slide. If the electoral system that we have in Maryland is not changed, we'll continue to have the same ballots with choices we don't like, and elected officials only care about making their bosses in the political party happy and the other party look bad. So how can we fix some of these things? So some of the changes people are talking about are things like, term limits and changing the whole financing for elections. Some of those things are going to require a constitutional amendment for those kind of changes, and I don't think they're going to happen in my lifetime. But there are 5 things that we can do that could happen in Maryland, could happen in a reasonable time frame, and give us a very positive impact to give us more choices to get people elected. We'll put passing sensible legislation that we need ahead of party politics. For that to happen at the statewide level, that needs to be passed by the state legislature at Annapolis. But they're only going to do that if they see a significant amount of interest in Maryland for those kinds of things. So as PJ said, we're a very grassroots effort starting at the city and county level to make some of these things happen. And as they do, build up to more and more cities into counties, and that gets the attention of Annapolis, and to a point where they see that this is something we've got to pay attention to. An awful lot of folks across Maryland are doing this and want to do that. So let's explore 5 things that could be done in Maryland. Next slide. So for each of the 5 reforms that I'm suggesting, we're going to start with what's the problem we're trying to fix. And then I'll talk about how that reform that we're suggesting works. And we also recognize that there are people who don't think this is a good idea. They're opposed to these reforms. So what are they arguing why we shouldn't do this, and what's our answer to that kind of argument? Today in Maryland, we have plurality voting. That says that the person with the most votes wins. If there are just 3 candidates on the ballot, Republican, Democrat, and Green Party, someone can win with 34% of the vote. If we get a 4th party, the Forward Party there, somebody could win with 26% of the votes. That's really disturbing to have that kind of voting happen. So how do we fix that? So right now, let's look at 5 different alternatives for the way that votes can be counted. Next slide. So I mentioned plurality voting. That's what we have today. A lot of people think we have majority voting. We don't. Majority voting says somebody needs 51%. And if we had the 3 parties running and somebody got 26%, we'd have runoffs over and over and over until someone got at least 51%. And those runoffs mean people having to come back election after election, a lot of money spent, and a lot of resistance to that, and folks just not bothering to come back and do that. So there's a lot of issues with that process. There are 3 different alternatives for totally different ways of counting the vote, and all 3 of them we think are significantly better than either plurality voting or majority voting. Approval voting is vote for everybody you like, and whoever gets the most popularity can do that. Star voting is like, Amazon and some of the others is a 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, who are my 5-star candidates. The one that's got the most traction in Maryland is ranked choice voting. And with ranked choice voting, or RCV for short, that is one that, as I said, it's got a lot of interest in. So let's talk more about ranked choice voting. So with ranked choice voting, voters can rank candidates in order of their preference. This is the person I like most, this is the person I like second most, and this is the person 19th in my list of people as part of that. And it promotes majority winners because it can take that ranking, and when the voting is closed, the ballots are closed in seconds. It can go through as many runoffs as it's needed to determine who won as part of that. And looking at who's got, what candidates are number one on the most ballots. So let's walk through an example, and I think that will help people understand it well. So this is my ballot for Ward 8 of the City Council. The Democrats are running Amy Adams on the ballot. My forwardists have Barta Boston on the ballot. Carla Casey is the Republican candidate, and Darius Green is the Green Party candidate. And this ballot is for the general election. We're looking for one winner as part of this. So, of course, I voted for Barta as my number one candidate, being the forwardist. Andy's the incumbent who's done nothing for me, so I gave him the lowest ranking that I had, fifth choice. I could have checked more of the boxes for Andy, and the computer would still treat that as the lowest ranking. I was not excited by Casey either, so she got a number 4 ranking, just as I've done for 3 presidentials where I was not happy with the candidates. I did a write-in and wrote in Bob Dylan for my number 2 choice. So that was my vote cast. So let's look at, now the ballots have closed. What does the computer say happened? So not surprisingly, in Maryland, Andy, the Democrat, got the most votes, but only 40%. So if we had plurality voting, he'd be elected. But we don't. We have ranked choice voting as part of that. He didn't make the threshold of 51%, so the computer's got to do a runoff. Darius had the least number of votes. Bob Dylan got no votes for number 1, so he's not even part of this consideration. So if this is a primary election where we want to get who's going to be on the ballot, then Andy, Barta, and Clara would be the 3. But this is a general election. We want one winner. So we're going to do an instant runoff. What that does is go to Darius's votes, okay, the 10% of the votes that he got, and said, okay, who did Darius has as number 2? And once we do that and bring his number 2 votes in and start counting them, just the ones from Darius, let's look at what that gives us in terms of new results. So I'm feeling really good. Berta was number 2 on 80% of the ballots that Darius had as his number 2 choice. And Andy only got 20.1%. So right now it's 42 to 38%, really close. But none of the ballots that Darius had as number 1 had Carla's number 2, so she's stuck at 20%. So now we need another runoff to get somebody at 51%. So this can be a little confusing. Let me sum it up another way. The computer's looking at all the ballots that had Andy, Barta, and Carla as number 1. And they're looking at the 10% of the ballots that had Darius as number 1. On that 10%, 8% were for Berta and 2% were for Andy. So the green box shows that extra, 8% and 2% that they got as part of that. So we're doing now that second runoff, and here, we've now taken Carla's votes and who she has number 2 and plugged that in. Okay, and here are the final results, and darn it, Andy won the election, and he's now been reelected. He picked up 18 of the 20% that from Carla, and Berta only got 2% of the ballots. So the Republican got the Democrat elected. But it's great that new party like Ford has got 40% of the votes here. Now, if your candidate doesn't get the most number 1 votes, then who you put as number 2 can really factor into that calculation. So quick summary on how this works and how the mechanics work as part of this. So why don't people like this? Well, the arguments against it are really 2. First, it's too complicated, and nobody understands it. Now, you just got a 182-second explanation of it, example of it. Is that too complicated? I think with a little bit of education, folks could do it. And, the first time you at age 18 went in and voted for the first time, it was a little complicated. It was confusing. But, once you did it, fine. And I think the same thing will be true here. The other question people get as well, the computers do all these runoffs. How do I know if they're fair? Well, yeah, election fraud can happen in any form. Okay, for thousands of years, people have been miscounting ballots or losing ballots, paper ballots, and other things as part of that. And when we have paper ballots, they get scanned and they get put in the computer, and the computer tells us who won. So if the computer has been hacked and given fraudulent results, it doesn't matter how we count the votes, it's fraudulent. So nothing different there. We're just eliminating the fact of people needing to come back multiple times for those runoffs, and instead having one election and be able to do the runoffs and quickly come up with that answer as part of that. So where is ranked choice being used? There's a lot of support for it nationally. Alaska has both ranked choice voting and an all-candidate primary, which we'll talk about next. Republicans and Democrats made a major push last year to have the voters do away with that. And the Alaskans said, no, we like it, we're keeping it. And in the Senate race they had there, ranked choice voting let a moderate Republican win over a Trump-based MAGA candidate. Jamie Raskin, my congressman here in Maryland 8th District, has submitted a bill in Congress to make RCV national. Great, really would love to see that happen. I don't think that's going to see a vote on the floor anytime soon, unfortunately. Around Maryland, all incorporated municipalities in Maryland have the ability to adopt ranked choice voting themselves as their primary target. Tacoma Park passed it 2 years ago, Hyattsville last year, Greenbelt just recently, and our main targets this year are Frederick, Annapolis, and Rockville. At the county level, including Baltimore City, state approval is needed before they can implement it. But to get enough cities within that county to do it, then that county will pass it and bring it to Annapolis and put the pressure on them to approve it. And the first couple counties being the state, the test cases to show that this works and it's a good idea as part of that. But again, we're going ground up, building that up from there. So there is a national ranked choice voting day coming up on the 23rd, and we're supporting that in 5 places in Maryland. 2 of them on the 21st, in Frederick and College Park, and the other 3 on the 23rd, Friday. Baltimore City, the Charlestown Community Center that we mentioned, where our club is, and in Rockville as part of that. Would love to have lots of people at each of those events, and Colin Greer is kind of organizing for that. Colin's on the call here as well. So I'm going to take a minute and post this information into chat so that you can copy it out and be able to get a hold of Colin and kind of know what's going on there. And while I'm doing that, Colin, if you have anything you'd like to add, you're welcome to.
Thanks, Bill. I do have one late breaking item. The Baltimore City event, same times, same place, but it's been moved to the 22nd. So now we've got events next week on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So if folks have a lot of free time next week, we'd love to see you somewhere all 3 days. And I'm also excited to announce that at the Baltimore City event, Comptroller Brooke Learman will also be attending. She's a major supporter of ranked choice voting, and so that's a really big deal for us and something we're really excited to host. In terms of everybody's support, really all we need are volunteers to come out to the events, say hi, show some support, learn a thing or two about ranked choice voting, meet our friends from Ranked Choice Voting Maryland, Baltimore Indivisible, the Green Party. We've got a lot of our good friends from other organizations that are coming out to these events too, and it's really nice to show forward support. So I hope you'll be in contact if you're interested, and we'll get an email out later with contact information for the individual events as well.
Thanks, Colin. So, PJ, do we have any questions from folks around ranked choice voting?
Not that I'm seeing right now, but we'll pause maybe just for a second to see if there are.
Okay, so next slide. So our second priority is how do we get people on the ballot, okay? And why don't we have more choices other than people who've been in the office for 30 years and done nothing? So we're looking at and the idea of single all candidate primaries for all voters and all political parties. So how do people get on the ballot in Maryland? The answer is that Maryland recognizes 3 political parties that can put candidates on the ballot for election. the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and the Green Party. During the last election, I had many people tell me that if Hogan had run as an independent, they would have voted for him. And I really liked him much better than also Brooks, but didn't vote for him because it would give the Republicans control of the Senate, which they got anyway. So they couldn't vote for him. But there is no independent party in Maryland. Hogan had three choices. I wasn't going to get on the Democratic ballot. He could run as a Republican or Green Party. He chose to run as a Republican, and had enough people opposed to him. They didn't win as part of that. There is, as I said, almost 1 million Maryland voters who are listed as independent, but have no official affiliation, so no primary. They're not involved in that process. No candidates from there can get on the ballot with, that are listed as part of that. So to be recognized as a political party in Maryland, what we in the Maryland Forward Party, that's what we're trying to do. It requires delivering paper petitions with over 10,000 signatures. And no electronic signatures are allowed in Maryland. Based on past history of the scrutiny given those paper petitions, the general rule of thumb is you don't have 17 to 20,000 signatures, they're not going to tell you you've got 10,000 to accept. So it's really that kind of number, almost double, that will be needed to be able to pass and become a political party. Republicans and Democrats are working hard to make it even more difficult for a new political party to be recognized in Maryland. Once we are recognized as a political party, we then have a time frame to get 35,000 people registered as members of the party. And that time frame is two gubernatorial elections. And that's why, again, our target is to try and get it right after the 2026 election and then have 4 years to do that as part of that. So in Maryland, two of the recognized parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, each run their own primary for statewide election. You and I pay for each of those primaries, but the two parties have exclusive control over when they are and who's going to be on the ballot as part of that, kind of everything involved with that process. Those candidates who've been very loyal to the party are given a strong preference. We've heard multiple, threats from Trump to tell Republicans in Congress that if they don't back his decisions, they wouldn't even be on the primary ballot, much less have a chance to get reelected. That's the kind of power plays that are being made as part of this. So given those very limited choices every year, very few voters think it's even worth their time to go in and vote in the primary. So we're trying to change that process to a single all-candidate primary. Next slide. Oops, I already did that one. So one more. So isn't this open primaries? Some of you have heard about open primaries, and there are some very good organizations promoting this as a solution. The concept of an open primary is, just that we aren't locked into just what the Republicans want and what the Democrats want. That's a much more open, inclusive process, including independents. But that's been misused in some places. Virginia has open primaries. So Democrats can vote in the Republican primary in Virginia, and Republicans vote in the Democrat primary in Virginia. But if they do, they've got the hand-picked choices. And again, independents are locked out because the Republicans and Democrats aren't going to put them on there. So they call it open, but it really isn't, very different than what we have today as part of that. So we're partnering with open primary groups in Maryland to try and get different ideas here. But we've got a specific approach that we think makes the most sense. So next slide. That is a single all-candidate primaries. One primary, every person on the ballot is listed there, and so the Green Party can list their candidates be there. When the Maryland Party is a party, we can have our candidates there. And you, the voters, everybody is registered to vote, including independents, can come in and pick the top four or the best five, final four, best five, whatever that will be on the general election ballot as part of that. Like ranked choice voting, this can start at the city level and grow to the county level and build support needed to be adopted statewide. For each election, as I said, there's only one primary and one ballot, and everybody gets a chance to vote on that. And if the Republicans have 3 candidates, Democrats 3 candidates, Green Party 2, and we have 3, outside 11 or 12 different candidates, well, how do we pick the final 4? We need something like ranked choice voting to be the right way to do that. So these 2 things fit right in. One thing I forgot to mention when I talked about ranked choice voting, let me jump back just for a second there. The Maryland voting machines and paper ballots are fully able to handle ranked choice voting. So nothing new, no significant expense or problem to do that once it's adopted. And as I said, we've got different places, 3 cities adopted it now and several others working hard to do that as part of that. A few states are now doing that at a stateside level. As I said, Alaska has a single all candidate primary along with the ranked choice voting. So, next slide. What are the arguments against a single all candidate primary? For the states that have Republicans and Democrats, they want to control it, and they're concerned that this can be manipulated. Democrats can come in and vote for the Republican that nobody wants, okay, and that person's on the ballot, so the Democrats will win. The Democrats can do the same thing to Republicans, and we end up with 2 people on the ballot that nobody wants that are the best candidate from each party. So that's not really an argument. And with all the candidates on there, you really are going to get the best ones as part of that. Now, even when all the winners are determined by a voting approach like ranked choice voting, having many choices for each office can mean extra work who we want to vote for, and how do we know which of those 13 that are the best. But if we get people elected to Congress that will get bipartisan election passed, the things we need, isn't that better than we have now? Is that worth a little more time to look in and decide who to vote for? So, any questions folks have on single all candidate primaries? Questions are highly encouraged.
Looks like David added a link for anybody who's interested to the chat for a good reference website.
Okay, great. Thanks, David.
I was wondering how many candidates you might get on your ballot, a single all candidate ballot.
It would be the sum of what each of the political parties wants. So again, if Republicans want 3 or 4, the Democrats want 3 or 4, then you've got 6 to 8, plus whoever made the Green Party, and then when we're there, how many we have. So you could have easily a dozen, you could have maybe 5, and up to over a dozen, depending on how many candidates each party wants to put on there.
Well, how do without their own primary, how do the Republicans decide who their primary candidates are for the single all candidate?
Well, that's what they're doing right now. The people that are on the ballot when you go into the Republican primary, those same folks will be on the ballot for the all candidate primary. So they're doing their own winnowing process through committees and internal politics to determine who gets to be on their primary ballot. So that doesn't change. It just means that there's a lot more choices besides their handpicked folks. So there's no primary to be on the primary.
Yeah, unless those parties choose to do that in addition, behind their own closed doors internally.
Yeah. And paying for it themselves.
Right. Another thing with coupling ranked choice voting in here is that even if you have 12 to 15 candidates on the ballot, with ranked choice voting, you don't have to fill out all 15. You could just pick your top 2 or 3 if you'd like and leave the rest blank. That's still doing the job of ranked choice voting. So you have that level of flexibility to kind of identify your top 2 or 3.
Is each party guaranteed a spot on the general election ballot? Or, for example, if the top 4 are all Democrats, Republicans, then they're just the ones that advance?
If we had our proposal adopted, then yes, each of the parties would submit as many people as they wanted for each of the offices that they want to. For certain offices, they could choose not to submit any candidates. But it's whatever each party wants to put up as their candidates for each office.
And same, it is plausible that it, like in downtown Baltimore where I live, you could potentially end up with 4 Democrats on the general ballot, on the general election ballot, or out in a more conservative county, you might end up with 4 Republicans potentially as well. So that could potentially happen.
Got it.
This
Thank you.
model.
Okay. Our third priority is ending gerrymandering and using independent commission to define electoral districts. So in each state, the party that's in power has the right to adjust how the electoral districts are defined. What's become the norm over the years is to define boundaries so that just a few of the districts have most of the parties for the minority, the party not in power. That means that the party in power has a very high chance of winning most of the other districts and keeping their majority. The process of ignoring sensible definitions for electoral districts, like city and county boundaries, has been nicknamed gerrymandering. Now, up until 2025, this has been mostly done every decade when the new census data comes out, because districts are supposed to have about the same number of people in each one. But now we've got a new level of political chicanery as parties are trying to find ways to rig the 2026 midterms for more Republicans or more Democrats. So gerrymandering is getting even worse than it's ever been before. Next slide. So what is gerrymandering? So here's the Wikipedia definition of gerrymandering, and the map on the left is a simple example. So you've got a basic geographic region, and you've got a West District, an East District, and a Central District. That's pretty easy, okay? East, West, Central. Except what they've done is decided to put all the Republicans into just the Central District. So they pull pieces out of the West and East District where the Republicans are, put them in the Central District. So Democrats are going to the East and West every time, and the Republicans don't even have a chance. They're going to win the Central District, but they don't have a chance in the other two. So just cooking the map to try and do that, that's what an example is. So if you think that looks bad, let's take a look at what our congressional districts in Maryland look like now. So, you know, you look at Western Maryland, okay, down by the shore, Maryland 1, that's not so bad. But then you take a look at Maryland 3, the purple, it's wandering all over the place, okay? And Maryland 4, Maryland 7. You know, this craziness as part of this. I'm in Maryland 8 district, okay, and the little tiny, you know, piece of Albany just isn't in Maryland 7, just into Maryland 8. So this is, you know, what we've got, what we need to be put up with. And again, the effort right now is to make it even worse, you know, with what Governor Moore wants to do. So districts, as I said, are required to have approximately the same number of people. In 2021, Maryland had an independent commission look at this and come back with a recommendation as to what the better electoral districts would be. So next slide.
Yep. And while we're on this one, Maryland is by many sources considered to be in the top 5 already worst gerrymandered states in the entire country. So some of these proposals are making that even worse. Oh, geez. Not sure what happened there. Why don't we just keep going?
Okay. Probably someplace up the slide we wanted to have right now will come up with the electoral districts here, so we'll jump back to that. But there's a really, you know, good, intelligent, sensible way to do the districts that made good sense. And because it makes such good sense, it's gotten absolutely no traction in Annapolis as something being considered as part of this. And, you know, as the governor is trying to redo the districts to get rid of the one Republican district, so it's all Democrats, just to get one more cooked vote for the Democrats in 2026 as part of that. You know, we have opposed that, and you know, we sent a letter to the governor opposing that and recommending the independent districts, you know, commission suggestion as part of that. Getting gerrymandering ended in Maryland is probably the long pole in the tent in terms of what's going to take us the longest time to get done, just because the people who need to do it are the people who benefit from it. But we're continuing to work on it. Annapolis just had, you know, trying to do something around this as part of this as well. So you know, there is a lot of interest in doing that. and seeing what we can do as part of that. So what are the arguments against gerrymandering? The people, the majority party in Maryland, obviously the Democrats, only we can draw the correct electoral districts. Anybody else does it, you're just trying to hurt our candidate. Well, yeah, and you're just trying to hurt the Republican candidates as part of this. So Democrats fight long and hard to keep the power they have, but in the local areas where there is a Republican majority at the local level, they're doing the same thing to try and keep their control away from the Democrats as part of that. So, and again, we're just locking the independents out of any consideration, and more folks giving up to the two parties, becoming independents, even if they're weakening and you know, fewer things that they have any control over as part of that. So if we can end that gerrymandering and put the forward party in place, we're going to give the independents a very interesting place for them to go and be able to have a significant voice into what's happening in Maryland that they don't have today. So any questions about independent districts, commissions to define electoral districts? Okay, our fifth priority is how can different communities better communicate with elected officials? And this is a new initiative that we're excited about. So I'm retired, and my oldest granddaughter, who lives in Frederick, is now voting age. So the things I want the people representing me to do are important to me are very different than a 19-year-old. Okay, she's not wrong, and I'm not wrong, but both of us have a voice, and the people representing us need to hear that and understand that and consider that in terms of what they're doing. So we've targeted 17 different communities of interest where we want to build a relationship with the members of the forward party who are in each of those communities and help them make elected officials aware of the things that are important to them. We have a very active legislative affairs committee that gets information to different elected officials to influence their voting.
Okay.
And to get inputs from these folks, different communities, into the legislative affairs committee so they can get it to the right people.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just so you know, sorry. We're on 4.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead. Got my notes confused here, so let me jump ahead to that. Okay. So, legislative vacancies. Right now in Maryland, 25% of the people in Annapolis took office without being elected. They were appointed by that. So one example, on August of last year, Teresa Warman was sworn in to be the delegate for Maryland's 16th district, replacing Delegate Sarah Love. And she received 14 votes to take that office. And that was a committee that appointed her into that, okay? And the people in that 16th district had no vote. So when she comes up for re-election and as an incumbent has a much better chance of being elected, you know, is she going to answer to the people in the 16th district or to the committee that put her in place? So 25% of the people there took office without being elected into that office. And who are they supporting as part of that? We think this is a significant problem and one that needs to get addressed. So next slide.
This is one of the most pressing things in the state of Maryland that is like sidebarring our democracy and our democratic processes here.
So we believe Maryland needs a law mandating special elections. So in the last election in November, Angela Also Brooks, Prince George's County executive, was elected to the Senate, leaving her post vacant. Well, Prince George's County called for and did a special election and elected somebody to come in as the new county executive. That's the way it should be, okay? As opposed to the committees trying to do this. So next slide. Right now, there's a bill, HB 0075, that calls for and mandates special elections to fill legislative vacancies. In 2024, we've been supporting that. We had the bill as part being considered, but it didn't get out of committee. We worked very hard in 2025, got it out of committee, got it voted on in the House and passed in the House. It got to the Senate and it didn't come up for vote in the Senate. So this year we're working again. Our Legislative Affairs Committee is working hard to get that to be voted on in the Senate, get it passed, and get it put on Governor Moore's desk to sign. So this is one of the real strong initiatives that our Legislative Affairs Committee is doing. Okay, and Lisa, what's Lisa's last name?
Smith.
Well, sorry?
Smith.
Lisa Smith is the lead of the Legislative Affairs Committee, around our work that we're doing as part of this. So any questions on filling legislative vacancies? Okay.
While we're checking on questions, I just want to add in that we actually had something to do with that PG County election through supporting our former board member, Tanya Sweat. We helped to put pressure on the PG County Council and the government to hold those elections. And we can continue to do that in other places if we speak up at the right time.
Great. Okay. So now on to the communities of interest. Oh, what are the arguments? I'm sorry. What are the arguments against doing this? Yeah, and there is a cost for a special election, and some time elapses until the election's held, and that seat's vacant until then. Those are, no question, legitimate concerns and questions. But the high cost of the special elections, part of that is that Republicans and Democrats are both doing a primary, and then then we have the election with a single law candidate primary that happens faster and at lower cost as part of that. And what's most important is the people in the 16th electoral district need to determine who they want supporting them, not some people deciding that for them. And so we need to have the electoral process filling those positions quickly, but through the electoral process with special elections. Now I think we're finished this one. Okay, so how can the different communities better communicate? I mentioned the retired example as part of that. Go ahead, PJ.
Looks like Adam has his hand up.
Okay.
Adam, you might be muted. Microphone not working. Just write it out in the chat and we'll answer it there.
So while Adam's doing that, so we've identified 18 different communities that we want to form of communities of interest, and folks getting together there and sharing the things that are important to them. So young voters and seniors, the two examples I gave. Women, as definitely having some things that are very, very important to them. Veterans and their families, racial and ethnic minorities, and maybe we'll have just a Black group or a Hispanic group, starting with racial and ethnic minorities, and then expanding that further as folks are interested in doing that. People with disabilities, federal workers certainly have their interest in, and this year they've been under a lot of stress from things that the government's done. Unions and professional associations. Next slide. Educators, immigrants, LGBTQ+, parents and guardians, different faith communities, small business, and then urban, suburban, rural, the three areas. So those are the 18 we have. So Adam's question, making it easy to write the letters will. I'm really not following that.
Yeah. So we will, as we're advocating and tracking these bills in the legislative cycle this year, we will be communicating out to all of you, mostly through those who are following our newsletter, but through some other email blasts as well. We'll have kind of tools and resources to be able to click a single button and automatically email your state legislators. So more to come throughout the next 2.5 months here.
Thanks. Okay, so next one. So when will these communities get started? This is a great idea. And the answer is when these will get started is you have to tell us. This is an exciting idea. It's a big departure that the way the two major political parties that have always been top down, this is bottom up. And PJ talked about community up problem solving. That's what we want to do. But it'll remain just an exciting idea until some people get together and form one of these communities. With my involvement with the Maryland Forward Party being on the board, I can't take on the leadership to form a senior community. But if one or two people want to do that, I'm signed up to be a member and be part of it. And that's what we need is, one or two people saying, let's form a women, a black, a veteran. And we've got all of those, in our volunteer community and get one or two of those groups started. The Forward Party leadership will provide mentoring, suggestions, ideas, helping that group get started. We've done a little bit of that with the club that PJ mentioned at the Charlestown Retirement Community. I'm going in and sitting in their meeting that they're having in February as part of that. So we'll do everything we can to make them successful, but we've got to have folks wanting to get together and share their thoughts and ideas and feed those back to us. So this has got to come from a bottom up as part of that. So any questions about building communities of interest?
So one additional note, and you mentioned this a little bit, we have the tools and resources to be able to create virtual calls, to create event pages, to promote these. All we need is a date and a time, and we can get one of these scheduled tomorrow. And we're really excited to start having these and start to grow these groups. And they can really take on any form that we want or that the group decides they want. Some of these groups may just be a social meetup once a month. Some of them may just come with specific issues that they want to be targeting. It could lead to advocacy work. It could lead to legislative work. They could target candidates that are supporting initiatives important to them. So it could kind of take any route that the group decides.
Great, thanks, PJ. So as I've gone through these 5 priorities, what did you not hear much about? The answer to that question is the Maryland Forward Party. I'm going to finish up with some thoughts on one of our key strategies in communicating to people to get them interested in the Maryland Forward Party. When you talk with somebody, maybe a family or friend about the Forward Party, maybe it's somebody sitting next to you on a bar stool, or maybe it's a meeting you've gone to as part of that. Hopefully this training class helps you be comfortable talking about some of the priorities we're doing, why we're doing it, what we're trying to do, and getting folks interested in the approach we're taking. But how do you start that conversation? So next slide. There are some real household names of high-tech companies that have had enormous success. Google, Microsoft, Oracle, okay? But there are thousands of high-tech companies that had a great idea, built a solution that provided great benefits, got some early customers, but never reached critical mass, and their great idea ended up on the scrap heap. Jeffrey Moore, and click, wrote a book called Crossing the Chasm all the way back in 1991. It talked about how innovators created great ideas and were able to get some early adopters to buy that technology and prove it really worked. But they didn't understand that early adopters is a very small market. And the mainstream market is composed of people who think very differently. And there's a very big chasm between the early adopters and the early majority that need to buy into an idea in order for that to have critical mass. So crossing the chasm was, how do you take that early success and turn it into critical mass? It's a very interesting book. It's at all American libraries, Maryland libraries, and recommend you read it. And there are some very close parallels between the challenges of getting a high-tech company started and taking it to a level where it is a long-term player, and starting a new political party and having it grow to be something more than a fringe player, like the Green Party is in Maryland today. So the next slide. So Andrew Yang and his close associates are the innovators who started the Forward Party, okay? I think most everybody on this call probably is an early adopter. Some people that maybe this is the first meeting they've joined, might be a early majority as we talk about that. And love to hear your thoughts if you are as part of that. But none of us are politicians, but we do get excited about ideas like ranked choice voting and ending gerrymandering. We know we face significant opposition from the Democrats and Republicans in Maryland, and we're maybe one of the only things they can agree on. But we're willing to live with radical changes like a single law candidate primary. But not everybody thinks that way. Next slide. To become a political party in Maryland, we need to get 35,000 people in this state to register as a member of the Forward Party once we get that party status. To be a significant player in Maryland, we need to get 1 million people to register as a member of our party. There are not 35,000 early adopters that we can find and talk to get them to register as a member of our party. We need to have a message that's of high interest to the early majority. If that message is very effective, we could find 1 million early majority people might be interested. At some point, we need to look at how we might get the interest of the late majority, but I think that's at least 5 years away. So I'm just going to really focus today on how we talk to, how we build relationships and get interest in that early majority community. So some of the key differences in talking to early majority people, they're not risk takers. They want solid references that we're a real political party and we're not lunatic fringe. They're much more comfortable with evolution than they are with revolution. They want to enhance. They don't like rip and replace. Most importantly, we need to understand and talk to their values and concerns, not ours. Once they get seriously interested, they're very loyal, but we've got to establish that common ground to have that initial discussion. So how do we do that? Next slide. The first lesson we have to learn is not an easy one. We're very comfortable talking about the things we like and know about. We generally start a discussion or presentation with, let me tell you a little bit about the Forward Party. When you do that to an early majority person, you've locked yourself into a room they reserve for the lunatic fringe, and they're no longer paying any attention to you. We need to start the conversation in a way that gets us to common ground. Those first 3 slides that I covered were all about frustrations and issues with elections in Maryland, not solutions, and not how wonderful the Forward Party is. If someone is not frustrated with the elections and some of the people in office, they're not going to be interested in us, and we don't need to have that conversation. But if someone did share their frustrations and the things they didn't like, we've established common ground, and we're starting to have a good mutual conversation as part of this. This slide shows examples of 2 of our social media posts. Which one is an early majority person more likely to click on? The one on the left is all about us and all the great things we're doing. The one on the right talks about a problem that Maryland has. I believe we're going to get a lot more early majority people clicking on the one on the right than we are on the one on the left, because it's talking about their values, things that are a concern to them as part of that. It's not easy to stop talking about what's important to us, but we have to learn to talk about what's important to them and use that to get to the common ground. So in your work, if you have to sit through a presentation, it could be internal, especially if it's an initial presentation from a company that wants to do business with your company. What are they talking about? Just take a listen. Are they talking about the things that are important to them or the things that are important to you? When I did my initial briefings before I retired to senior DoD leaders, my opening statement was, we've all heard that there are 2 things in life that are guaranteed, death and taxes. I will guarantee you 2 things that will happen tomorrow. The first is you're going to have even more data to work with than you have today. And the second is you're not going to have any more people to help you pull what you need to out of that data. And I immediately had their attention. I was frequently told by my bosses, we need to establish our credentials first so we have credibility. If this meeting was our first conversation that we had, would you think I was credible talking about electoral reform from what you heard? Do you like people who tell you how great they are, or people who show you that they're worth talking to? So we can wait and talk to at the end of the discussion. If someone this was interested, maybe you'd like to learn a little bit more about the Maryland Party and follow it or get involved with it, Maryland Forward Party as part of that. So next slide. We're really encouraging for any type of communication with the early majority. We'll have a much higher chance of success if we do these 4 things. First, get agreement on the problem. Again, were you happy when you left the ballot box? When was the last time you were excited about a candidate? Some of the things we talked about on those first slides. Number 2 is potential solutions to get more choices, and things that could work. Go ahead. So single all candidate primary, ranked choice voting, independent commission to end the gerrymandering. Again, we're not talking about the Maryland Party. We're talking about, these are some ideas we have. What do you think about them? What questions do you have? And have a conversation about things that we might be able to do. Okay. But it's at the grassroots level, at city, county levels, and making that happen. There's no easy button to make something happen at the national level. That takes a long time and a lot of money. Happening at the city level can happen a lot faster, and you build that up to the county level. When you talk about success and talk about doing things at the grassroots level, that is music to the ears of the early majority. That's what they want to hear. You've got that kind of game plan. You're proving success before you go any further, and it's not wonderful and grandiose. It's building a solid foundation and going up from there. And then we go to the call to action. So if they're interested from the things we talked about, they want to know more, would they like to know more about us and potentially get involved in helping us as part of that. This has been a short summary of a very important topic. And again, one that in practice, it's not easy to talk about things that are important to somebody else. It's most easy to talk about things that are important to you, things you know, things you like. So it's a real behavior change. I'm kind of the standard bearer in the Maryland Forward Party for this approach, and happy to talk more with folks. If I can help you, help your committees, your teams, with something like this, happy to do that. So with that, we're now through. We're going to stop the recording now and open the floor to comments. I'm going to be sending all of you a link to the recording for this when we post it on YouTube, and that will probably happen either Friday or Monday. And I'll also include a copy of the slides in that email. If you want my speaker's notes, just so you can look at those as you look at the slides, let me know, and I'll send you a PDF, with the speaker's notes as part of that.